Welcome back to part 3 of this 4-part tutorial series where we're using 3 different lighting methods to take your renders to the next level. Part 1 and 2 we made the scene and then we learned how to do volumetric lighting, and now we're going to learn how to make atmospheric particles to sort of fill up your scene. They can be used to add a lot of depth to your scene. We use them to make it look almost sort of dusty in some scenes, or add some sort of atmospheric particles, which could be, I don't know, like fireflies or something in other scenes, or in the case of this scene, it's going to look like sort of burning embers or something, which is really cool. But yeah, let's get cracking with it. So essentially to make these things, it is just a bunch of dots floating around in your 3D space. And to do that sort of in the easiest way and most controllable way, that's using geometry nodes. So what I'm going to do is jump back into the viewport shading here and add with Shift A cube. And I'm going to call this dust generator. There we go. Dust generator. Cool. So now I've got that. I'm just going to jump into my geometry nodes workspace. And I'm going to press the / on my keyboard just to solo this cube here. And of course, create a new geometry nodes workspace. And then I'm just going to move this up so I've got more space to work in. Lovely. Cool. So all we have to do is spawn a bunch of points inside of this cube and then move them around as the scene progresses. And that's super easy to do. So I can turn this cube into a volume by pressing Shift A and typing in mesh to volume and clicking there. And you can see that sort of turns it into a cloud. And then I can do another node called distribute points in volume, which does exactly as it sounds, and it distributes some points in that volume. And I can actually turn up the density there so there's more, which is super nice. If I then want to move these points, I can add a set position node, which does again exactly as it sounds. It sets the position of them. So I can drag these there and it's going to move them all. But I want to affect them all individually. So I need to plug in a noise texture. So if I type in Shift A and type in noise texture, and then plug that into offset, and then change this to 40. If I change this W value, you can see it's affecting all of them. Essentially what a noise texture is doing is it's taking all your points and it's randomly offsetting them by a value between 0 and 1. Now the problem is if you take 1,000 points and you offset them between 0 and 1, on average, they're all going to move 0.5 on the X, Y, and Z axis. So you can see our cube here is actually moved up by 0.5 and moved across by 0.5. But unchecking this value here just normalizes it back to 0, 0, 0. In other words, it subtracts 0.5 from all the values. So we've got a nice way to sort of offset them. And now all we need to do is find a way to just automatically iterate this W value here, which is super easy. So Shift A, search scene time. And if I plug the seconds into W and press play, it's going to take how many seconds we are into our scene, and it's just going to change the W by that value. Now, of course, this is going way too fast. So we want to make this value smaller. And if I do Shift A and type in math, and click there, change that to divide, and then divide the seconds by, say, 20. You can see we have our bunch of points floating around, really nice, in a cool sort of random fashion. I might actually want to slow that down even more, maybe 40. Now these are currently just arbitrary points. If I were to go into our renderer, you can see they actually don't exist, and that's because they have no mesh on them. So I just need to move this over here, type in Shift A, and I need to instance on points, and that will allow me to put something on all those points. And now there's going to be potentially loads and loads of these points in your scene, so you want them to use up as little geometry as possible. Most dust particles are just little spheres, so we can just type in icosphere, which is a sphere, and instance that on the points. So now we've got a bunch of these low poly spheres. So if we just make those really small, like this, maybe 0.01, and press play, you can see they're moving around. And if we jump into our viewport shading, and we need to press that / again to get everything back, they will be around here somewhere. Obviously, they're quite small. Yep, you can see they're there in your scene, which is really cool. So all we need to do is make this cube at the start even bigger, and then just tweak around with some values to make these float around in your scene and make some cool sort of dust. So I'm just going to select those again and press / to solo them. Now to make life easier, instead of having this cube here, which we've got as our original geometry, I'm going to replace that. Press delete, search, Shift A search, and type in cube. I'm going to replace that with a geometry nodes cube. And I'm going to press Shift A value, put that in there. And now I can make the cube as big as I like. Now the only problem is, as I make this cube bigger, it's going to spawn more and more and more and more particles. So if I were to drag this too high, it's going to crash my computer, which it just has done. So we're going to fix that so that doesn't happen to you. This is why you should always save your projects. I keep on crashing my projects somehow. As I increase the size, I probably also want to decrease the density by the same amount. Now, because cubes are cubic, if I were to double the edges of the cube in length, it's going to increase the volume by 2 cubed. So just to keep the density or the amount of particles the same, when I increase this value, I need to decrease the density by this value cubed. So if I just drag that into a math node and I change that to power cubed, and then I divide a value of 1 by that. So essentially, as this value gets bigger, it's going to cube it, and it's going to divide 1 by that value. So this value, the density, is going to get smaller. And that's add, which is why it got so dense. Make sure you change that to divide before you do that. And maybe I want to, so as I increase the cube there, I can make it the size of 50. It's not going to crash my computer, which is really nice. And then I can increase the density here, maybe to 500, maybe to 10,000. You can see I've got a bunch of things there. And if I change that to a value of 1, it's going to have the same amount of particles there as if I were to change it to 100. They're just going to be more spread out. So that's going to stop your computer from exploding like mine did if you accidentally make the cube too big. Because of course you want to be able to resize it for your scene like we have here. So actually I can bring this size down to maybe 50. Yeah, maybe 50. Maybe 50 is too much. Maybe 30. Just so it encompasses our scene there. Now if I jump into the camera and press play, you can see our little points are moving around. Oh, and of course I've got to re-instance those icospheres on because my computer crashed. So instance icospheres, make them very small, make them even smaller, boom. And as you can see, well, as you can't see really because of our scene's very dark, but it has got a bunch of these nice little particles in. Now, just so we can see these and to create that sort of ember effect, we just need to apply a material to it. So I'm just going to change this over to our shader editor, create a new material. I'm going to call it embers. And then here on our instance on points, after we instance, I'm going to do Shift A and set material. And I'm going to set that to the embers. Now if I delete this principal node, Shift A and add a emission node onto the surface, and I turn off the overlays, you can now see all our points because every single one of our points is emitting light, which is really cool. So if I just make those red, they're going to feel like embers. Now to really make the most use of this effect and make it feel like there's depth, I'm just going to add some depth of field to our camera. So that's pretty much it in terms of actually making the dust there. You obviously can mess around with how much you divide the scene time by to make them speed up or slow down, or you can mess around with the noise, texture, scale, or detail as well, just to see how they move. Now I quite like how these are moving now, so I'm probably just going to leave them as is. But yes, let me jump into my layout and add a depth of field. I'll change this back to my 3D viewport as well. I'm going to save it in case I crash it again. Now, I'm just going to add the depth of field here and maybe change it to a 1 on the f-stop. And you can see as I make this really small, you get these really nice sort of soft particles close to the camera, and then the ones which are in focus are more little dots, but it creates that nice like depth to your scene. Now I just want to focus the camera on the middle there. I'm just going to take this eyedropper and focus it on this empty, which we put in there in the last tutorial, just because it's in the middle of the scene. And you can see our camera is now focused on the middle there. It's probably a little too out of focus, so put 0.5 maybe. And yeah, that's now sort of got our thing in focus, but all our little particles there are out of focus. Maybe there's slightly too many, so I'm just going to go into the geometry node editor and just take that density and divide it by 2, I reckon. Having too many of these in your scene as well is going to cause your computer to slow down, so be careful there. And actually, I think I might make these a little smaller as well, so I'm going to divide that by 2. I don't want them too big and too in your face in this scene. Maybe split the difference, 0.75. And yeah, now if I turn on motion blur, when I render that out, it's going to give me these really nice sort of streaky particles, which give that extra depth to your scene, which is really, really cool. So yeah, let me know how you're enjoying the tutorial series. We've covered making this scene, we've covered doing volumetric lighting, and now we've covered doing the particles to add more depth and interest to your scene. And then in the last one, the next tutorial, we're just going to add some lens flares, which are really, really nice, and just polish off the scene. Let me know if you've got any questions below, and I will see you in the next one.